Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to do Wings of Fire by Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, who, as we know, was the former president of India and one of the most famous scientists this country has produced. Right? He was known as the missile man of India. Right? And so now we'll read a bit about the author before we go on to the lesson. So Abul Pakir Jainuddin Abdul Kalam, 15th October 1931 to 27th July 2015, better known as APJ Abdul Kalam, was the 11th President of India from 2002 to 2007. He was a scientist turned statesman. So he was actually a scientist in the DRDO, the Defense Research and Development Organization, and later he became the President of India. Born and brought up in Rameshwaram, Tamil Nadu, he studied physics and aerospace engineering. Rameshwaram is a small island off the coast of Tamil Nadu. He was born and brought up there, and he studied physics and aerospace engineering. He studied aerospace engineering at the Madras Institute of Technology, as it was known then. He left his footprints as science administrator at DRDO and ISRO. So his legacy, the work he has done, is still relevant today. And the work he has done, the corpus of his work, is there in the Defense Research Development Organization at ISRO. And he was also instrumental in setting up the internet, what we have today as 5G networks. It was pioneered by APJ Abdul Kalam, right? He worked in India's space program. He came to be called the Missile Man of India. So the Missile Man of India, he was responsible for setting up of missiles like BrahMos and so on. Those are nuclear missiles. ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. They can travel across continents. He played a pivotal role in Pokhran 2 nuclear test in 1998. So in Pokhran, they carried out a nuclear test, primarily as a warning to our neighbor, right? So he played a pivotal role in the Pokhran test in 1998. This extract is taken from Wings of Fire, an autobiography of APJ Abdul Kalam with Arun Tiwari. He worked under Kalam for over a decade in Defense Research and Development Laboratory, Hyderabad. This extract gives us an introductory insight into Kalam's life, his childhood and the people who influenced him, his family, his upbringing and early days of struggle. Also could be noticed the cultural and religious milieu Rameshwaram offered young Kalam. So in this story we're given the childhood and youth of APJ Abdul Kalam, the people who influenced him, his family, his upbringing and the early days of struggle, right? And in this lesson we also learn about the cultural atmosphere of Rameshwaram and the religious upbringing that he had in Rameshwaram. And so here we're told, now we come to the actual lesson, Wings of Fire. I was born into a middle-class Tamil family in the island town of Rameshwaram in the erstwhile Madras state. Erstwhile means the former Madras state. What is now called Tamil Nadu was then known as Madras state. My father, Jainuddin, had neither much formal education nor much wealth. So, he was not educated and he had not inherited too much property. Despite these disadvantages, he possessed great innate wisdom and a true generosity of spirit. So, despite not having an education, a formal education, a good formal collegiate education, nor having inherited any wealth, he still had two qualities which set him apart from the others in Rameshwaram. Those two qualities were a great innate wisdom. So he was born with wisdom, right? Innate. It was latent in him. And a true generosity of spirit. He liked people, he liked to, guide people, and he had an ideal helpmate in my mother, Ashiyamma. So, a helpmate is a wife, right? So he had the perfect helpmate in his wife, that is Ashiyama. I do not recall the exact number of people she fed every day, but I am quite certain that far more outsiders ate with us than all the members of our own family put together. So in those days, it was a custom for people to drop in at any time of day or evening, and they would be treated to some snacks or to some lunch or some meals. So, and that was the custom then. So the author says that he does not recall the exact number of people his mother fed every day, but he is quite certain that far more outsiders, many more people from outside, ate at their own house every day than all the members of the family put together. Right? My parents were widely regarded as an ideal couple. So, ideal couple, in a sense, there was a harmonious bond between them, and they never quarreled, for example, right? So, they were regarded as an ideal couple. My mother's lineage was the more distinguished. Lineage is her parents, her grandparents, the forefathers of the author's mother. They were far more distinguished, right? One of our forefathers having been bestowed the title of Bahadur by the British. So, one of the forefathers of his mother, the author's mother, was given a title of Bahadur by the British. So, they were more distinguished. I was one of many children, a short boy with rather undistinguished looks. So, the author, when he was growing up, he was just like any other child. And he was born to tall and handsome parents. We lived in our ancestral house, which was built in the middle of the 19th century. 19th century means around 1850, 1860, like that. So this house that he was lived in was built in the middle of the 19th century. It was a fairly pakka house made of limestone and brick on the Mosque Street in Rameshwaram. So in those days, many houses were not pakka houses; they were kacha houses. So the author's house was a fairly pakka house made of limestone and brick. My austere father used to avoid all inessential comforts and luxuries. So, for example, he did not have too much to eat or did not have too warm clothing. He avoided all inessential comforts and luxuries. However, all necessities were provided for in terms of food, medicine, or clothes. So, if nobody went hungry in the household, and if anybody fell ill with a fever or cold, they were given treatment immediately. And the clothes were also suitable. So the necessities were taken care of. In fact, I would say mine was a very secure childhood, both materially and emotionally. So it was a very secure childhood. No problems as far, no traumas or no things like that. Or it was a very secure childhood, both materially and emotionally. I normally ate with my mother sitting on the floor of the kitchen. She would place a banana leaf before me on which she then ladled rice and aromatic sambar. Ladle means that in Kannada you say sautu. Right? She would ladle rice and aromatic sambar. The sambar used to have a delicious fragrance, a variety of sharp homemade pickles and a dollop of fresh coconut chutney. So, a delicious meal used to be served every day. The famous Shiva temple, which made Rameshwaram so sacred to pilgrims, was about a 10-minute walk from our house. So, Rameshwaram is famous for the Shiva temple. So, Rameshwaram means Rama plus Ishvara, right? Rameshwara. This temple was sacred to pilgrims, was about a 10-minute walk from the house. Our locality was predominantly Muslim, but there were quite a few Hindu families too, right? Living amicably with their Muslim neighbors. So there was no communal tensions, nothing of that sort. All communities lived harmoniously in that, in that community, right? They lived amicably with each other. Amicably means on friendly terms. There was a very old mosque in our locality where my father would take me for evening prayers, right? I had not the faintest idea of the meaning of the Arabic prayers chanted, but I was totally convinced that they reached God. So, deep-seated belief in God was instilled in the author by his father from young age, right? He believed that his prayers reached the feet of God or Allah. When my father came out of the mosque after the prayers, people of different religions would be sitting outside waiting for him. So, many of them offered bowls of water to my father, who would dip his fingertips in them and say a prayer. This water was then carried home for invalids. So, his father was regarded as sort of imam, right? So, an imam is the head of a mosque. So, after the evening prayers were over and his father was coming out of the mosque, many people would offer bowls of water. The author's father would dip his fingertips in them. That would make the water holy, and that water would be taken to the respective homes and given to the invalids, those who were ill, right, or had fever. I also remember people visiting our home to offer thanks after being cured. So, the people's belief was strong that if this holy water was given to an invalid, to an ill person, who was suffering with fever, for example, then that fever would be cured. My father always smiled and asked them to thank Allah, the benevolent and merciful. So there's a strong belief that God came directly to earth through some people, for example, like the author's father, right? So he's regarded as a sort of holy person. The high priest of Rameshwaram temple, Pakshi Lakshmana Shastri, was a very close friend of my father's. So the high priest of Rameshwaram temple, the name is Pakshi Lakshmana Shastri, was a very close friend of my father's. One of the most vivid memories of my childhood is of the two men, each in his traditional attire. Traditional attire means the traditional clothes. The author's father would probably wear the clothes of the Pathan, the Pakistani clothes, and the priest, that is Pakshi Lakshmana Shastri, his father's close friend, would wear the dhoti, the kache panche, the holy ash, the nama, and other such signs of their religion, each in his traditional attire discussing spiritual matters. Right? When I was old enough to ask questions, I asked my father about the relevance of prayer. So he used to, he used to absorb all this sort of atmosphere, right? And when he was old enough to ask questions, he asked, what is the significance or the relevance of prayer? What is the importance, or how is prayer relevant to our lives? My father told me there was nothing mysterious about prayer. It's a fairly obvious thing according to the author's father. There's nothing mysterious about prayer. Rather, prayer made possible a communion of spirit between people. Communion means communicating. Now, communicating not only in the sense with words, but communing with the spirit, establishing a bond, right? So rather, prayer made possible a communion of spirit between people. Why you pray? When you pray, you transcend your body and become part of the cosmos. See, when you establish a bond with another person, right, and you go on like this and you see God in all parts of creation, you're establishing a relation with the cosmos. You're essentially saying that anything else is not separate from you, okay? Anything else is dependent. For example, a tree is dependent on you. It depends on you, for example, not to cut it down or to harm it, or it depends on you to water it. Similarly, all people are dependent on us. We should not harm them. We can help them. So, you see, anything you see is relevant to us. It is part of ourselves. So, essentially, if you look at not only the practical aspect, for example, if you have a shelter the relation between you and the shelter is it keeps you warm. The main reason why we need shelter is to keep ourselves warm, is to not expose ourselves to the cold rain or the cold snow and ice, especially the cold rain here, right? So, you see, if you can establish not only the practical aspect, but also the other aspects. For example, the window is like the eyes and kitchen is like the stomach, right? And all these places where how you establish a relation between things, your shelter, your food. A relation is possible between the food and the eater and people and nature. Essentially, you're establishing a relation between yourself and you see yourself as part of the cosmos, which knows no division of wealth, age, caste or creed. It knows no division of wealth. I am richer, you are poorer. There knows no such division of wealth or age, right? I am older, you are younger. Caste, I am this and I know that. Creed, right? My father could convey concepts, complex spiritual concepts in very simple, down to earth Tamil, right? Down to, so very ordinary vocabulary he used to convey complex spiritual concepts. He once told me in his own time, in his own place, in what he really is, and in the stage he has reached, good or bad, every human being is a specific element in the whole of the manifest divine being. Right? So we can take the example of ourselves, in our own time, the time here and now, in our own place, here and now, in what he really is, in whatever we are doing, in whatever we are thinking, in however we are interacting with others, in whatever we do, in what he really is, and in what stage he has reached. Has he reached his potential? Has he reached his ultimate, what he's capable of? Is he still developing? In whatever stage of development we really are, good or bad. It can be good or bad. So it's no need to say that that person is wicked and we should avoid him. Because you see, if you see the wicked person, then you become alert. Right? As you are not alert with your friends. With your friends you're comfortable, you're relaxed. But with the enemy you are alert and you are on your toes and you're excited and like that. Right? So whether a person is good or bad, they both depend on each other. Right? And every human being is a specific element within the whole of the manifest divine being. So the whole of what we see is part of the manifest. Manifest is something that is there, something that we have brought about. Manifest divinely. So why be afraid of difficulties, sufferings and problems? See, difficulties, you say that a difficulty is an opportunity in disguise. Right? So not all opportunities will come to us or like they will not be served to us. Many times they'll disguise themselves as difficulties. And even suffering, it is a sign of health, the health of the body. Actually, they say, ultimately, the more you suffer, the healthier you are. Because, you see, unhealthy man, he is not capable of great deal of suffering. But a healthy man is, right? So anyway, you see, that is one of the signs. Not necessarily that you should suffer to be healthy. But even sufferings are a sign of health. So why should we be afraid of? Why should we be afraid of difficulties, sufferings, and problems? When troubles come, try to understand the relevance of your sufferings. So you see how when troubles come, then you're in a problem. Your mind is, let's say, you're undecided about what to do. But that actually puts you on your. Like you become like a soldier, you have to fight the problem, right? Like you are facing an enemy, it can be any problem, right? So essentially you're like a soldier who is alert and he's on his toes, right? So that he doesn't get overpowered by the problem, right? So try to understand the relevance of your suffering. Adversity always presents opportunities for introspection. So many times we do know the problem. For example, if you're in the exam and you studied well and a question comes up and we are not able to remember the answer immediately, it is like that. We do know the answer to the problem, but we're not aware of it. So we're going to make an effort. So you see, adversity, like not being able to answer the question in the exam, it actually presents opportunities for introspection. So we must think, we must remember, try to remember what the solution is. Maybe some great author has offered a solution, maybe we'll read about the solution, maybe the solution is obvious, but all the time it provides opportunities for introspection. How to overcome? We debate within ourselves. We introspect. We inspect means to look, and intro means inward. So look inwardly. How can I overcome this problem? Do I know the solution? Who can I ask? How can I read about it? Such things, right? Why don't you say this to the people who come to you for help and advice? I asked my father. He put his hands on my shoulder and looked straight into my eyes. For quite some time he said nothing, as if he was judging my capacity to comprehend his words. He's judging his capacity to understand the words, because he's an adult and the author was still a young child. So can a young child try? And then he answered in a low, deep voice. His answer filled me with a strange energy and enthusiasm. Whenever human beings find themselves alone, as a natural reaction, they start looking for company. Whenever they're in trouble, they look for someone to help them. Right? Whenever they feel alone, they want company. Whenever they're in trouble, they look for someone to help them. Whenever they reach an impasse is something they cannot overcome. They look to someone to show them the way out. Every recurrent anguish, repeated problem, longing and desire finds its own special helper, right? So the solution is waiting for us. Only thing we have to, search for it. It is a means of coming into touch with ourselves, right? For the people who come to me in distress, I am go-between in their effort to propitiate demonic forces with prayers and offerings. So he's a go-between. The author's father was a go-between. See, if a person was ill in those times, it was commonly thought that person was possessed by a demon. So essentially, they would call the author's father, who was the imam, and the author's father was a go-between between the demons inhabiting the ill person's body and health, right? So this is not a correct approach of all, and should never be followed. It's not a demonic force. It's only an imbalance in something, right? One must understand the difference between the fear-ridden vision of destiny and the vision that enables us to seek the enemy of fulfillment within ourselves. So there's a difference between a fear-ridden vision of destiny. What will happen to me in the future? Will I be able to manage? If we think like that, then we begin to feel fear. Will I be able to manage? Will my strength hold out? Will I be able to continue to do what I'm doing? So we should not have a fear-ridden vision of the destiny. There's a difference between the fear-ridden vision and the vision that enables us to seek the enemy of fulfillment within ourselves. So how can we, as individuals, deal with the problem? So how can we deal with it? There you're looking for a solution. But if you say, I can't, how on earth will I manage? Then the very words themselves show that you are unsure. So you must look positively at a problem, right? So essentially, what the author is saying is that, next. I remember my father starting the day at 4 a.m. by reading the namaz before dawn, right? After the namaz, he used to walk down to a small coconut grove about 6 kilometers from home. He would return with about a dozen coconuts tied together, thrown over his shoulder, and only then would he have his breakfast. This remained his routine even when he was in his late 60s. I have throughout my life tried to emulate my father in my own world of science and technology. So his father was a religious person, the author was a scientist. He tried to imitate. Emulate means to imitate in the author's own field of science. I have endeavored to understand the fundamental truths revealed to me by my father. And feel convinced that there exists a divine power that can lift one above from confusion, misery, melancholy, and failure. So only if you're in touch. See, there are three paths to overcome problems. One is a path of bhakti, the other is a path of work, and the third is a path of knowledge. And in these, path of bhakti, praying or supplicating before a God is the easiest. Path of knowledge, how to overcome the problem with these rules, with these methods, that is the most difficult. Path of work, working to overcome, you do your work routinely, then the problem is over. So the path of bhakti, the path of yoga, and the path of jnana. And those are the three. So here you see, the author has tried to understand the fundamental truths revealed to me by my father and feel convinced that there exists a divine power, yogic power, path of bhakti, path of jnana, path of yoga. A divine power will lift one up over from confusion, misery, melancholy, and failure, and guide one to one's true place. Right? And once an individual severs his emotional and physical bondage, he is on the road to freedom, happiness, and peace. So oftentimes the enemy is ourselves. We are overcome by things like anger, but they're not actually enemies as such. There's no need to treat them as though they're different from you, they're a part of you. So you must recognize that even things like anger, jealousy, hatred, all these negative things are also a part of ourselves. We cannot be dissociated until perhaps after we become a bit more mature, they will die down on themselves, a part of a person's life. And many times these emotions they stop us from helping others, or things like compassion, sympathy are lacking in some periods of our life. So recognize that they're part of ourselves. Right? So anyway, once that physical and emotional bondage is removed, he's on the path to freedom and happiness and peace of mind. Right? I was about 6 years old when my father embarked on the project of building a wooden sailboat to take pilgrims from Rameshwaram to Dhanishkodi, also called Setu Karai and back. His father became a ferryman. Ferryman means he works on the boat. He worked in building the boat on the seashore with the help of a relative, Ahmad Jalaluddin, who later married my sister Zohara. I watched the boat take shape. The wooden hull and bulkheads were seasoned with heat from wood fires. My father was doing good business with the boat when one day a cyclone with winds of about 160 kilometers per hour carried away our boat, along with the same some of the land mass of Central. So even the beach was swept away in that cyclone. The Pamban bridge collapsed with a train full of passengers on it. Until then, I had only seen the beauty of the sea. Now its uncontrollable energy came as a revelation to me. Right? By the time the boat met its untimely end, Ahmad Jalaluddin became a close friend of mine, despite the difference of our ages. He was about 15 years older than I and used to call me Asad. We used to go for long walks together every evening. As we started from Mosque Street and made our way towards the sandy shores of the island, Jalaluddin and I talked mainly of spiritual matters. The atmosphere of Rameshwaram, this flocking pilgrims, was conducive to such discussions. So they would merge with the crowd and they would have the spiritual discussion. Our first halt would be at the imposing temple of Lord Shiva. Circling around the temple with the reverence as an east pilgrim from a distant part of the country, but the flow of energy passed through us. So they became touched by the holy atmosphere. Jalaluddin would talk about God as if he had a working partnership with us. Working partnership means every day he communicated with God and God told him this and he replied. And as he is a working partnership with, represent all his doubts to God as if he was standing nearby to his God. So, some people talk to statue of an idol. Some people even talk to plants about their problems. Some people talk to the pets. Right? So, Ahmad Jalaluddin talk to God. So as he was standing nearby to this person, I would stare at Jalaluddin and then look towards a large group of pilgrims around the temple taking holy dips in the sea, performing rituals and reciting prayers with a sense of respect towards the same unknown. unknown, right? So it's a spirit with whom we treat as a formless Almighty. I have never doubted the prayers in the temple reach the same destination as the one offered in our mosque, right? So they were both, whether they were prayers offered in the mosque or whether they were prayers offered in the temple, they would reach the same formless Almighty. I only wonder whether Jalaluddin had any other special connection to God. Jalaluddin's schooling had been limited principally because of his family's straitened means that they were short on money. Right? This may have been the reason why he always encouraged me to excel in my studies and enjoyed my success vicariously. Vicariously means putting himself in the feet of the shoes of the author. Whenever the author passed an exam, Jalaluddin would also feel happy for him. Right? Never did I find the slightest trace of resentment in Jalaluddin for this deprivation. Right? So he never felt sad, I couldn't study, I couldn't be educated, never felt resentment. Rather, he was always full of gratitude for whatever life had chosen to give him. Incidentally, at the time I speak of, he was the only person on the entire island who could write English. He wrote letters for almost anybody in need. Be letters of application or otherwise, job application. Nobody of any acquaintance, either my family or neighbor, even had Jalaluddin's level of education or any links of consequence with the outside world. Okay? So we'll stop there. We are on page, one minute. We are on page 47 of the PDF counter on the PDF. So we'll stop there, we'll continue in the next class. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.